Hi, I'm Paige Ann Olson. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I noticed the other day that my carry-all bag was getting a little bit long in the tooth. I probably made it 10 years ago. I've had it for a long time, so it's time for an upgrade. So I went online and looked at a lot of bags, but I found one that I really like. It's a Minky Kim pattern called Quilter's Big Tote. You can download this off of her website. If you'd like to join me while I make this, I'm going to show you how I make it and the fabric that I used and kind of my thinking about putting the colors together. And I hope you'll join me as I make this bag. The pattern that Minky Kim used, she used all black and white fabric. Well, at least in this one she did. And I didn't really want to use just black and white fabric. So I looked through all of my layer cakes and decided I wanted something pretty colorful. So I picked, I don't know how long I've had this layer cake. I probably had it 5 or 6 years, I don't know. But I picked a, it's called Lulu Lane by Corey Yoder. And it's just a mixture of really pretty prints. They're nice and bright, and that does make it a little bit of a challenge because you have to separate light from dark. So I'll kind of show you how I did that. Because you want a contrast. You're going to put together a square, and the middle, it's called a windmill square, and the middle needs to be darker than the outside, or you could do it the other way around. You could have your windmill lighter and your background darker if you want to, or you could even just do a plain, square. You don't even have to piece anything together. But I like the way she constructs her bags. She actually will kind of piece things together, and then she uses that pieced piece of fabric, and that's how she makes her bag. And I really like the way she does it. She's got a lot of other really cute bags, and there's another one I've already downloaded that I'm gonna show you how to do in a later video. A little bit of a tip. I don't know if you buy a lot of layer cakes, but I have bought a lot of layer cakes and I don't use them right away. But you don't want to just leave a lot of them. Some of them are completely wrapped in plastic, and that's great. Some of them are not. So I, many years ago, got online and bought these cellophane bags that have a kind of tape up here. You're familiar with them if you've ever gotten anything, if you ever order anything. And I put all my layer cakes in these bags, and I seal it like that. And that's how I store them. Then they don't get dusty or musty, or, nothing gets in them. So just so you know, the bag that I have is a 12 5/8 by 12 5/8. They come 100 to a bag, and it's called Unique Packing. And if I can find the link on Amazon, which is I think where I bought this, I'll include it in the notes, so you, if you're interested, you can certainly buy them. They were not very expensive. But again, if you buy a lot of fabric like that, or put your own layer cakes together, it's a really good way of keeping them so that they're nice and ready to go. Now, I did not starch this fabric. I probably should have, but I ended up not doing that. Certainly you can. In my last video, I talked about starching. I'm going to have an update to that because I've changed some other things about the way I'm going to do some starching. I'm going to try to do something homemade that still is a spray, just because it's really kind of getting difficult to find the faultless spray starch at Walmart. When I go, a lot of times they'll have 1 can or 2 cans or nothing. And I live in an area where there are a lot of Walmarts. So other people are obviously using the same way to starch their fabric as I am. So one of the things about this particular fabric, because it's so light, I just want you to kind of show you how I separated the lights from the dark. So what she tells you to do in the pattern is you're basically going to take your layer cake, and you're going to take half of them. They're 42 squares, 10-inch squares in a layer cake. And you're going to separate, half of them are going to be in a dark pile and half of them are going to be in a light pile. because the idea is to make this little patch. You're going to actually make 40 of these for this size, 20 on the front and 20 on the back. So you see you're going to need 8 little squares, 4 of the dark and 4 of the light for each square. So as you're going through your fabric and you're cutting and you're taking out your 20 light squares and your 20 dark squares, I kind of cut everything that I needed to make the first 10 squares, which is all I've made so far. And I just kind of laid them out to see which ones I liked the best and which ones I thought had a nice contrast. So far, these are the squares I've made, just so you can kind of see, hopefully, you can kind of see the contrast. At least I hope you can, that's the idea. And then this is gonna, and it's gonna be, and of course, when you put these squares together, you can randomly, you can duplicate, you can have some of the squares be exactly the same, you can have them all different, however you wanna do it. So I have got one more of these squares to put together to have 10, and then I'm gonna cut out enough for the rest of my squares. So I have 30 more squares to cut out. And so I'm gonna go put this together and cut out the rest of my squares, and I'll be back. So here are my blocks for one half of the bag, for one side of the bag. And I have finished cutting out the rest of my rectangles and try to match them all together. And I'm gonna sew these together, and then we'll be ready to kind of place all of the blocks out and kind of see what looks the best. And then we'll get ready to construct the bag. So what I'm gonna show you is how I put these together. So you're just going to have these rectangles, and this is directional. So I want to make sure that when I sew these together and put it in the block, that 2 of them will be facing up. The other 2 will be on the side, but we can just chain piece from here. And I have my, it's too slow. I have my length at 1.8, which is really the length at which I piece is 1.8. I hope you can see that. And I'm doing a scant 1/4 of a stitch instead of a 1/4 inch. I'm doing a scant 1/4 inch, which means it's not quite a 1/4 inch, not quite a 1/4 of an inch, because when I put these together, we're going to trim them down, but if I do a 1/4 of an inch, there's just not much to trim. So that's why I went ahead and did what's considered a scant, which I'm just going in a little bit to the left of my 1/4 inch mark and my 1/4 inch foot. One of those might be a little bit too, maybe 1/8 of an inch, but it's really not what you want. But I'm kind of doing this by eye. And you know, the more even you get these, the better stitch you're going to get, and the better block size you're going to get. So I've got this chain done, and all I do now is I just cut it. And I'm going to take this over to the sewing machine, and I'm going to press toward the dark. You can finger press it, but I'm going to press it toward the dark, just like that. And then I'll be back and show you how I put it together. So I have put all my rectangles together, and you'll notice, since this is directional fabric like I talked about, the roses on this side are pointed up, and then they're just laying down on this side. Be careful when you're using directional fabric to lay out your piece, if you're going to do this particular pattern, to make sure it's oriented the way you want it to be. So the next step is to sew these together just like that. I'm going to chain piece them, I will show you how to do that. Oops, I'm gonna expand this so you can kind of see what I'm doing. Same exact thing that I did when I was chain piecing these pieces together. And I've explained before, but I put what's called a leader cloth, which is a piece of fabric that I place so that if you catch the edge of your fabric too soon, it will get eaten in your feed teeth. So that the leader cloth helps avoid that. So you get a clean stitch at the beginning of every line of stitching that you do. And again, I'm doing a scant 1/4 of an inch. Now this time, I'm gonna actually, press these seams open. I'm gonna press these open instead of over to one side. So I'll press these open and I'll bring it back and show you how I finish that block. I'll trim it and it will be ready to go, and I only have 19 more. Here is my almost completed windmill block. All I have to do is put the 2 halves together and sew right down here, which I will do quickly for you. Then I will trim it. Oh, after I press it. I'm going to also press this seam open. You may do whatever you want, whatever you're comfortable with. Some people don't like the idea of pressing seams open at all. I do a combination of both, depending on what I'm doing. Like this one, I did some toward the dark and some open. And I have found when I quilt or put this on my long arm, it is usually not too bulky for the needle to go over. So here is my completed block. All that's left to do is press and trim it. And you need to make 40 of these if you're going to use this windmill pattern. So I have finished one of the panels of the bag, and I went ahead and put all of this together so I can show you what it looks like, or what it should look like, and then how I did it. And then here's the back, it's the lining, and I've gone ahead and quilted it, and I'll show you, or I'll explain to you what I did. So I organized all of my blocks, if you can see. And I, put them all in a row, 5 across, 4 down, which is what the finished, plus the lining and the binding, that's what it's gonna look like. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to sew the rows together, and then I will sew I'm going to sew each block together. That's what I'm going to do first. And then I'm going to sew each row together. What I did when I sewed the blocks together is I pressed open the seam. But when I actually am going to do the rows together, I'm going to alternate the seams so that when I sew the rows together, they will nest. But I'll show you what I mean by that. That's a little bit confusing. So the next step is to sew each block together by row. And I'll show you the finished product when I get back. So I have sewed my blocks together, and I have 4 rows, just like this. So the next step is I'm going to take this to the iron, and I'm going to press open each of the seams. And once I do that, then I will sew each row together. And once I'm finished with that, I'll show you what that's going to look like. There may be some kitty hijinks in this part of the video. They're awake and kind of running crazy. All right, so what we want to do is we want to duplicate the first panel and we're going to make 2 of these. And so to do that, we need to cut out the lining. And I cut out the lining. I've trued this up already. So you want to cut the lining about 1 inch all the way around, because when you quilt this, you're going to want to have, it's going to spread it out and you're going to want to have room. So I've cut the lining out already, and I've cut the bottom out already. And to cut the bottom, you're going to cut it the width of the panel by 4 inches. So the 4 inches on one side and the 4 inches on the other side of the panel is going to make this a nice wide bottom in this bag, which is really nice. The other thing that I did is I got some fusible foam. And you can use Decarbond, you can use Bosal, you can use batting. There's a number of things you can use for this bag. I like the foam for this because the quilting really pops. And we're going to use strapping for the handles, so it's going to be a really nice sturdy bag. We don't really need to use Decarbond because the flexible foam should work perfectly. You can buy this flexible foam one-side fusible or double-sided fusible. I bought the double-sided fusible because I felt it would be easier to put the panel on one side, the lining on the other side, and then I just gave it a very nice press, and it stayed down very nicely. I didn't have to worry about it coming undone. Just make sure it's a dry iron and a nice press. And so I was able to put the lining on one side and the panel on the other side, press each side, and then I will show you how I quilt it when I'm done with that. I'm going to sew this on, and then I'll be back after I have put everything together to show you how I quilt this. So I have everything put together. Here's my bottom and my lining. And so what I'm going to do, using my fabric pen actually, which is this one right here, I am making marks every 1/2 inch. Oops, there you go. All the way from the top all the way to the bottom. And then I matched my lining thread. So it's the color is butterscotch. It's kind of a tangerine, and I think it looks really good. So I'm going to finish marking this, and then I'm going to go ahead and stitch along each of these lines, and it should then look exactly like the other panel. Oh, I'll trim it up too, and then it should look just like the other panel. So the next step, once you quilt it, however, and you know what, I just quilted it straight lines, 1/2 inch in between each other, just so you can kind of see that. And I marked the bottom with my fabric pen. And what we're going to do is cut those out because we're going to box that corner. And this is just a nice guide to help me so I don't mess up the, let me see if I can, if you guys can see that okay. I'm going to actually come over here and you can maybe see it better. So I'm going to cut not all the way to the corner, because you tend to kind of, if you go all the way to the corner, you tend to go further into the item than you want to go. So I just wanted to show you how to do this. And then I just take a pair of scissors and I cut to the corner on both sides. So it's going to look just like that. And I'm going to cut the other side, and I'm going to do the same thing on my second panel over here. And I've already finished the binding on the top of this one. And I chose the same binding as I did for the lining. Can't really see it on the back, but you can on the front. So what I did, now you can use a bigger strip if you want to. The pattern calls for a 2.5 inch strip. I think that's too wide, but I like a smaller binding. So I cut a 1.5 inch piece of binding, and I'm going to sew the top. See if you can see this, okay? I'm gonna sew it right on the top, just like this, right across. I'm gonna take a 1/4 inch seam, and then I'm gonna turn it over. Once I've seamed it up, turn it over, fold the other side under, press it, and then do probably about a 2.5 length stitch for the top, if you can see that. And I just folded it over and just did a seam right there. So that's the next step, and I will do that, and then I'll be back, and the next thing we're going to do is the straps. I thought it might be easier to show you what I'm talking about. So I took my 1.5 inch strip. I have sewn it right sides together like this. I pressed it to seal the seam, and then I flipped it up like that and press it again. And what I'm going to do with this back is I am going to fold it just to the actual top, just like that. I'm going to fold it like that, press it in place, and then clip it over just like that, and then do my 2.5 stitch length so that it comes out and is a nice finish on this side. So I thought I would show you exactly what I was talking about. It might have been a little bit confusing when I was talking about it before. So I've completed both of my panels and one of the straps, and I wanted to show it to you. I think it's adorable, and it looks really cute with the bag. And so I'm gonna make a second one, because we need one for each side, and I want to show you how we put that together. The first thing you're gonna need is a 1 yard of strapping for each strap or each handle. So you'll need 2 yards, and this is 1.5 inches wide, and you can get this at any box store. I'll tell you about that in just a second. And then you're going to cut 9 of these rectangles, and I did just multicolors, and then 2 kind of end pieces. So I'm going to sort of lay this out and show you kind of my thinking. And I sort of tried to randomly put them together, but matching at least a color in each rectangle to help pull it together. But you know what? You don't even have to do that, because once you get it all done, you know, all the colors are complementary if you get them from the same layer cake. So it all looks really cute together. So this is kind of my thinking and how I laid them all out. Because I want to show you how to get them all together. Okay, so I laid them out. I'm laying them out for you. And what we're going to do is right sides together. We're going to put each one of these together, sew them all together. So you're going to have one long strip. Now what you can do, if you don't want to hassle with making your own handle, you can just buy some strapping if you want to, and just use the strapping. If you want to get a different color or whatever, you may have to order it. I don't know what your access is, but all I could find was cream or white and black, I think. So If you want to make your own, this is a good way to do it. Now, you also don't have to have a multicolored one. You could have just a solid strap as well. But I really love this idea of putting this strap inside because it really makes it nice and sturdy. And the bag's fairly large, so I'm going to put a bunch of stuff in it. So I want it to really hold up nicely. So once I sew these together, I'll come back and show you what that looks like. So here is the strip sewn together, and I have to press the seams, and I'm going to press them open. And once I press them open, we'll be ready to insert the strapping, and I'll show you what that looks like next. So I have pressed my seams, and this is what it looks like flat. So the next step is, you don't have to do this step. I'm going to show you how to do it, but you can eyeball it if you want to. I'm going to take my fabric marker and just make some register marks about an inch away from the edge, because I'm going to fold this over by an inch. And when I do that, we're going to tuck the strapping inside this little fold that I'm going to make. So, and I like it to be kind of even. It actually ended up working perfectly since I went ahead and measured. I don't trust my eyes to do it perfectly like I do a ruler, but you know, if you're more experienced than me and you can go ahead and mark an inch by just looking at it, and some people can do that. You know, in cooking, you know, people put in a tablespoon without measuring it. I don't do that much either because I tend to put more than I need. And if it's a spice, that's bad, wrong. So what I'm going to do next is just fold this over where I did the register marks, and I'm going to press. That's the next step. I'm going to press this down. I'm going to finger press it, and then I'm going to take it to the iron and press it, and I'm probably going to use my spray starch and my clapper just to make it a really nice, crisp, even fold. And then we'll put this in, and I'll show you how that works. I have pressed down the top and the side 1 inch, and I'm gonna tuck the top part of the strapping just like that, underneath the top and next to the fold. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and use my clips and clip this just so it will stay in place. And I'm going to use some glue, but I'll do that. I'll show you how I use that in a minute. So I'm just going to, this is what it's going to look like. Just like this. We're going to tuck it in there. So it's going to look like this. Hopefully you can see that. And I'm just going to clip this all the way down. Oops. To the edge. And then at the end, I'm going to take another inch and fold it down like that and tuck the end in like that. So this is what this is what it will look like when I finish clipping it. You can probably hear my kitties. They're playing with a noisy toy. And this is what it's going to look like, just like that. 2 ends clipped together. So now that I have clipped that one side, the other side, I measured in 3/4 of an inch. It seems to work out perfectly. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to finger press this. And I'm just going to show you, and then I'm going to take it to the iron and use my starch and my clapper. And then when I'm done with that, I'm going to fold it over, and it should come perfectly when I fold it over to this edge right over here. Just like that. And then I'm going to use my glue. This is my Roxanne glue, and I'm just going to glue the edge up here so that when I sew the edges down, and I also do some additional stitching, then it won't move on me, and it won't stick out at the end. Even though this will be inside the bag, I still want it to look neat. So I'll do that, and then show you how I'm gonna sew it, and then we'll attach it to the panels, and we're almost done with our bag. So I've got the strap ready to go to be put on the sewing machine, and of course I'm going to do some decorative stitching, which just means I'm going to do some top stitching. So I'll show you how I did it with this particular strap. I want to make sure you can see that. So I did each end, and then I did each side about 1/8 of an inch, and then I kind of eyeballed the middle, and then the middle and the middle. Hopefully that makes sense. Anyway, you don't have to do it 5 times. You could do it 3. However, whatever works well for you. I think the 5 stitches look nice though. They look nice and decorative. I think that looks good. We are ready to put our strap on our panel. I've got one ready for you here so you can see what it's supposed to look like. To find the center, the easiest way to do that is to take your panel, fold it in half, finger press it, as you can see I did, and then I went ahead and marked it. I marked the middle, and then I took my ruler and went 3 inches on either side, and that's where we're going to place our handle. So using the bottom, the orange part of the handle, that actually goes below the top. That helps you orient it. And so it's going to actually look just like this. So all of the print is on top, and this will be, the bottom part is part of the lining. So I'm going to pin that together like I did this. Make sure you use long pins because it's pretty thick to try to get through, and be careful, just go slowly so you don't stick yourself like I did, and just gently place them in there. Now, you can probably use a temporary glue if you wanted to. I didn't, but that probably would work just fine as well. So I'm gonna pin those in place and take them to the machine and sew them together, and I'm just gonna sew a rectangle around the bottom part, which really won't even show in the front probably, because it's such a busy fabric. So we're gonna do that, and then we'll be ready to put it together and bind the inside seams. All right, so I have my straps sewn on, and here is a close-up of how it looks. And I have put right sides together, and I'm going to do a stitch on both sides, and then I'm going to serge the edges. You can zigzag them as well if you don't have a serger, but I do, so I'm going to go ahead and serge the ends or the edges, because we're going to actually cover the seam with the lining fabric, and I'm going to come back and show you how to do that once I get the sides put together. Okay, so I have bound one side, but I want to show you how to do it. So here is what the serged edge looks like when I'm done with it. I'm going to cut these 2 strings left over. Serger doesn't have a lock. Mine doesn't anyway, have a lock, and there's no back stitch. You don't go forwards and backwards. So I have cut a 1.5 inch wide strip to the length of my bag, which is 16 inches tall right here, with an extra inch at the top. What I mean by that is this piece of fabric is an inch longer than the length of the side of my bag. Okay, so I'm going to clip this together, put the clip on, put this little binding, leaving the extra at the top, because when I sew this on, we're going to take about 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. I want to cover up that serging line, which is a little bit more than 1/4 of an inch. So I'm going to get to I don't have my 1/4 foot on my machine. I have my standard foot, and I'm going to scooch it over so it's a little bit more than 1/4 of an inch because I want to cover the serging. So I'm going to clip it like this, and then I'm going to go to the machine and I'm going to go ahead and take that seam down there, and then I'm going to show you how we do the binding. So I have gone ahead and sewn this side binding on, and I pressed it this way, and then I pressed the binding this way. So the next thing we're going to do is, and I'm hoping you can see this, is we're going to fold this in a little bit like this, and then fold it right over the edge, just like that. Let me see if I can make that more. So you're going to fold it in a little bit, not a lot, and then fold it over because you want to cover that seam. You want to cover that bias, just like that. So what we're going to do at the top, and I may have a little bit more than I need, but I'm going to press this, and then I'm going to fold that over like that, and using the same concept is I'm going to fold it like that and then fold it back over. So that's going to make this really thick. I'm going to cut this a little bit. It's too thick. And you're going to fold it over like that. So if that helps, you're going to fold it down like that, and then fold this like this, and then matching the edges at the top, fold it back over like that. And what I did is I went ahead and glued the top on the other side, which really helped keep it in place. And since it's so thick at the top, when you sew it down, once you actually put this binding like this, you're going to take it to the machine and sew that down to cover that seam. And it's really, really thick up here. So what I did is I started a little further down. I didn't start right at the top. I started down, and then I back stitched and then went forward, and it was fine. So that's the next thing we're going to do, and we are almost done with this bag. So I have finished binding the sides. They're both finished. So we're going to do the same thing on the bottom, exactly the same way that we did it on the side. I already gone ahead and cut my 1.5 inch strip by the length of the bottom, which I think is 14 inches. And I'm going to take it to the sewing machine, and I'm going to stitch it, and I'm going to do the binding exactly the same way. And when I'm done with that, the only thing we have left to do is bind the corners. And so once we do that, we'll be done with the bag. So I have taken the box corner and I have placed it together. And what I did is I kind of nested the seams so it wouldn't be too thick. So I've gone ahead and gotten that ready on this side, and I'm going to go ahead and take a stitch right here, and then I'm going to prepare a binding and do exactly the same thing with this corner that I did with the sides and the bottom. And I'll show you what that looks like when I get back. So here is our finished bag. I've done all the binding for all of the sides and the bottom and the corners. So all we have to do is turn our bag right side out, and for the big reveal, I'm I'm very happy with the way it turned out. Feels very sturdy. Like I'll be able to put, you know, notebooks, books. If you're in a book club and need a couple of books and a notebook, this will be plenty big enough for you. You could even use it as a tote. You could use it as an overnight bag. You could stick it on the plane with you as your carry-on. Here we are. So I hope you enjoyed watching me make this. I hope you'll try it. If you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I'd love to hear from you. I'm curious today, what's under your needle?